All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome into episode 6 of the Futurist Podcast. These are flying by, but that's just a testament to the guests that we've been having on. And today's guest is nothing short of high value once again, as we have Tanner Chidester, founder of EliteCEOs, a $60 million company, as he terms it. We're going to talk everything from business, entrepreneurship, lifestyle, health, everything under the sun. And so, Tanner, thank you for joining us today. I'm joined by my co-host, Hassan and Zan, as always. And Tanner, go ahead and give an introduction to yourself if someone doesn't know you. I believe you would have seen this man's short form content on Instagram Reels, for example. He's out there every day producing high quality content. Yeah, I would say so. So Tanner, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. So family, 1 of 7 kids, grew up LDS or Mormons, very conservative household. Dad was a teacher. Mom stayed at home. And I was really into sports growing up until about 22. And then around 22, when that dream kind of died, I started trying to build a business. 22 to 25 had zero success whatsoever. And then around 25, I started to take off. I had an online fitness company and things did really well. Propelled from there, I had a ton of trainers start asking me how I built it. And then I had more people ask. And so that's kind of turned into EliteCEOs and done over 60 million. And honestly, it was really 59 of it was 3.5 years. The other million was in 4. But yeah, so that's just quick rundown. And then I stepped out on the 1st of January this year and kind of doing nothing right now, trying to figure out my next thing.
Amazing, man. Amazing. That's very, very beautiful. Crazy to see that you've gone from that small town, life, and then going from kind of like a sports star to breaking into the business world. And now you even have your brothers working with you. Some of your brothers are working with you. You're supporting other people. I know that you've been, at least before you left and replaced yourself, you were doing a lot of, looking for different offers and kind of working a little bit like a portfolio company. What kind of, from, starting your offer to now not even being kind of in the day-to-day and now owning the asset, what do you think some of the largest challenges were? Because obviously you've gotten to a point that very, very, very few entrepreneurs ever do.
Yeah, it's just building the team, period. Finding high quality talent is the hard part. And then obviously keeping them being proactive. So it's easy when you're running the ship and you're kind of coming up with all the ideas and the marketing and the angles, and then you tell people to execute, but it's very different to have other people think about it, because ultimately when you step out of the company, if they're not being proactive, the company will die. So it just took a lot of time, trial and effort, and then really putting more of an emphasis on culture. I realized over time that it's not really about, it does help if they have experience, but it's better to take a culture fit over experience, because if someone, let's just say your culture is, work hard, be proactive, communicate. If they can't do those things, they never last, because it just slows everything down, I found. And so I think that probably took me about 4 years until I realized how important culture fit was. And then once you started doing that, it just really starts pushing people out who aren't a fit. And then you start attracting the people who are.
So where do you find those A players that help you take your business to the next level? I feel like in terms of keeping them, one of the biggest things is just paying them, right? And increasing their pay, having that vision. I feel like a lot of people, when they're starting out, they're starting to build their team, they feel like they want to retain as much margin as possible. But where do you find those people? How do you keep them?
Yeah. So, I just look at it ads. So we find a majority, I would say, between Indeed and LinkedIn, and then maybe our list. But then we just don't settle. And it's like ads. If you just wait long enough, you'll find the right person. What I found is more times than not, we interview a few people and then we're this person's good enough. I had one position I waited 6 months on, and I went through probably 900 or 1,000 applications, maybe more, to find this guy. So I think it's just more of the patience. And then when you interview, it's how you interview. So almost scaring them off by saying, hey, this is really hard. We don't have slackers here. This is what the expectations are. If you're not a hard worker, you're not going to like it. If you want work-life balance, this won't be for you. Just some of those things up front, because people worry that you're going to scare them off, but that's the goal. Because if you have someone who comes in, on an interview, the worst thing you can say to me is, well, how much time do I get off? Or what's my work-life balance work here? Because that's not, that would be good for you, but that's not really what's good for the business. And there's a balance. And so, yeah, if you've been here for 2, 3, 4 years and then things start changing, okay. But if day one you're asking me about vacation time and work-life balance, that's, to me, is like the totally wrong question that I want. So it was more of asking the right questions and then being patient when we're looking for new candidates.
I loved how, I remember you were showing this to me, where your interview process was one of the most intricate and tight knit that I've ever seen, where it was, you had them go through a course, which I thought was genius. Like you were like, look, everybody's teaching consulting courses. Why don't you teach the people who are coming into your pipeline for hiring? So you had a course, and then correct me if I'm wrong, once they went through the course, you gave them an exam, and then based on the scores of their exam, you would give them an initial interview. So like they couldn't even get on the phone with you or an interviewer until they showed competence.
Yeah, so it depends on the position, but for example, sales reps, there's no way to know if they're good, and everyone says they're good. So I would say, hey, here's a practice call, study it in a script. When you're ready, tell us, we'll give you a live call. They do the live call, and then if the live call goes well, then we'll interview. And then once they pass, usually we start them off as a setter for 30 days and make them eat shit to see if they've got what it takes. So there's a few positions you can do that. Some positions are a little harder because, it's like, what test are you going to give them, or how can you tell? But more times than not, if we can do that, we will. And then if we can't, we just interview really hard on the front end. And I just tell people, hey, look, this is what we're expecting. If you come in and do anything besides this, like, we're going to let you go very quick. And I just find that works better versus, telling them everything they want to hear. And then they come out and find it's not that way. It's always better if you say it's worse than it's going to be, because then they'll come in and say, oh, this isn't as bad as I thought, versus, oh, wow, this is way worse than you told me.
Yeah, it's that expectation management. You're like letting them know up front so that you can have longevity with them. I think, what the things that I'm really excited to talk about are a lot, in terms of personal as well. And I think, for a lot of entrepreneurs that I see, people like yourself, people like Ryan Pineda, you guys always mention that like sports was something that, you guys were doing into your early 20s. And I feel like that's like a very common factor that we see. We have people who watch the show from, starting out to high level individuals who are already making 8-9 figures in their business. What would you attribute? Would you attribute any of your success to, how disciplined and focused you were with sports? And I know that you modeled as well, and then how did you make that transition? Like, that's one thing to me. Like, I played basketball a lot, but I feel like I wasn't the most elite athlete. How did you make that transition from, an elite athlete into an elite businessman?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I don't even think it was that hard. It felt a lot easier because I was used to putting my body through quite a bit. An average day for me in college was wake up, work out, go to school all day. I was doing engineering, which was tough, go to practice, and then we'd have film. So you would do 6 to 7, maybe 8 hours a day of football, and then I'd have to do 8 hours of class and homework. So I saw why guys failed, because instead of after practice studying, they would go hang out with girls, because you couldn't do both. So I just didn't like, I don't know what people thought about me, but they never saw me with girls. That's for sure. So when I went to business, it was actually easier because all of a sudden I didn't have to be in this great physical shape. And to be quite frank, I think it's a lot harder to get up and lift weights for 2.5 hours and run 1,600 meters under, 12 seconds, or you have to redo it. Versus, sitting at a computer and typing. So it just turned from physical to mental. And I think that really helped me though, because in sports, like if I got frustrated or upset, I could just go like knock the shit out of someone. In business and so forth, I found when I did that, I actually did worse. And so I just more so had to focus, okay, like my physical strength doesn't help me here. How do I need to figure this out? And I just got really good at asking questions and then taking action. So I usually would have my mentor at the time would tell me something, or I'd ask him, and then I would also Google it. And then whichever answer I got back first, it usually like would help. And then I would just be taking action. I just think a lot of people think they have to know everything. And so as I'm going into this next phase of business, it's going to be the exact same thing all over again, right? There's going to be shit I don't know how to do and I have to figure it out. So I think it helps for the simple fact that when you face adversity, like you push through it, and that's sports. And I think a lot of people who don't play sports, you don't have to play sports, but they never faced any true adversity.
Yeah. And have you had any trouble maintaining your physique? Like I see, once you get into the entrepreneurial world, a lot of times you see people kind of go through these transitions. I know I faced it myself where sometimes I'm working too hard and I kind of push other things on the back burner. Have you struggled at all with maintaining your fitness? I mean, I look up to you in a lot of ways because I feel like, whenever I look at your stuff, you're still always on your shit, right? Like you're always drinking, you got your gallon, you're always working out, you're always on, yeah, where is it? you got your gallon, right? And so it's like, do you have any advice in terms of being able to maintain it, even though the ebbs and flows of business, like you go through highs and lows, sometimes it's hard to stay on your horse with other things like fitness.
Well, so when I started my company, I did get like out of shape for me, but out of shape for me is probably in shape for most people.
Like a 4-pack. You still had a 4-pack.
Yeah, or like 15+%. And I was used to being single digit, so usually I'd be walking around probably 7-8%, like legitimately, not the, bullshit numbers. But when you start running the business, I started realizing, hey, I'm not making money when I work out. And when I am working, I make more money. And when I stop working, I can't make money. So I just started going from like 2.5 hours of working out to 2.5 to 3 hours to an hour, like a couple days a week versus I would go every single day. But once you build the company and you get managers, I realized, okay, I get time back. So now I can use that time in other ways. And so now I work out just as much as I want. So I usually do about 45 minutes of cardio a day and then an hour and a half of lifting. I don't have to do that much, but it works for me. So I'm in pretty good shape now. When I was building the company, not as much, but I also think it's just where you're pushing it. I think sometimes you have to decide what's the most important in your life, and it's okay to let it go for a bit. The problem is most people don't really have that much self-control. And so they say that, like, I've met guys who literally, they've been on a diet for 5 years. They look exactly the fucking same. Like, it's not
$1 million question. What's more important, cardio or lifting?
I mean, long term, I think if you had to actually choose, I would do cardio. I think you look like shit if you don't ever lift, but the 45 minutes of cardio, like I got hooked up yesterday for a surgery and my beats were like 40 per minute, I think. So it's like way out there.
And you're 31 now. So that's
31.
insane. That's insane to have 40 beats a minute. That's crazy.
Yeah. But to answer your question, the reason people get fat is like more work, more stress. When you get stressed, your body automatically usually wants more energy or needs it because you're using a lot of output from your brain, right? But you're not moving as much. And then you're eating shit food, right? Because that's like usually like your dopamine. It's like, oh, fuck this. I don't want to eat a fucking salad. I want like some fucking cake and pizza because it helps you kind of relax. So it's different for everyone, but that's really why people get fat. And then what I noticed is when my business got bigger, my stress level goes down. And so I don't crave that food as much, at least for me. So right now I only eat twice a day. I haven't eaten yet. I'll probably eat after this and then I'll have dinner. And it's really hard to get fat if you only eat twice a day. That's kind of my rule of thumb. If you're more active, you can eat more. But if you only eat twice a day, it's really hard to get out of shape, in my opinion, because, your body doesn't work. Like if you're hungry at 8 and then you eat at 12, you don't need double the calories usually. You're going to eat usually about the same amount, but you're going to still feel just as satisfied within reason, right? So that's kind of what I've done now, but
yeah.
That's where they screwed us all, man. The 3 meals. Like you don't need 3 meals a day.
You don't. Unless like even as active as I am, it's like you don't need as much as you think you need. Your body can survive off very little.
Yeah, it's there's a fallacy behind breakfast that you can like look into it, and it's like the way that breakfast was introduced was almost a way to slow down people's days and have to like really bog their bodies down whenever the day starts. So it sounds like you're a big proponent of health is wealth. Would you say that like being more optimized health-wise has helped you with mental clarity as much as physical, just how you feel physically in your businesses?
Yeah, I mean, I notice now in my 20s, I didn't notice as much. I'm only 31 now, but I do notice that if I have a bad day of eating or like drinking, then when I wake up, I feel different. I don't feel as clear. I don't feel as like optimized. And I think it just goes to the fact your body as it gets older repairs slower. And so as a 20-year-old, it's like you can just shove a bottle.
Do whatever you want.
Yeah, you can drink, you can just take a whole gallon of alcohol and drink it and you'll wake up pretty okay. But as you get older, your body has to repair that. And so because you're repairing from that, you're not repairing from like a hard day of work. So you just kind of like stack that on, you feel shittier. So when I'm healthy and I feel great, I eat healthy, I wake up and like I feel awesome. I'm ready to go. I notice it a lot more when, even if I have like a high amount of sugar, or just even if I don't like drink or something, but if it's a lot of sugar or something like that, I feel it when I wake up.
Yeah, that brain inflammation kicks in. So, Tanner, I think that, you're one of those people that you didn't really have, a super successful family background. I know that you were one of 7. You're the guy that made it in your family. And then also you didn't just make, I see a lot of these people, they make their first few $100,000 or first $1 million a year or whatever, and they just totally lose their bearing on reality. They just completely change, their personality changes, the money amplifies who they really were, and things start to get, out of haywire. A lot of problems start beginning to ensue. One of the things that we've gone through is I oftentimes ruminate on the fact that, wow, like I literally remember, like I'm handing somebody a tip for $100 and I'm like, wow, like I remember I didn't have like $100 to just spend like this right now. Like I find it funny. Like I use like $100 bill, almost like a $1 bill or a $10 bill, because of just how much things have changed for you. You've had this meteoric rise to 8 figures. You did it in a relatively small span of time. As you said, 4 years, $60 million. And obviously, like you said, the first year it was like $1 million, and then things really just went exponential. I think there's very few people on earth that have had your level of exponential growth in such a short period of time at such a young age. Like you said, you're only 30. So kind of what could you go into that experience that you had of yourself, of the people around you, of your own mental health, literally expanding from basically not having shit to being a multi-millionaire?
Bro, I remember real quick, Tanner, right before you go, I remember when I first started seeing Tanner stuff, and it was like there was like a pre-Tanner era where I never saw anything, and then as soon as he started going everywhere,
currently it's 5 AT after Tanner.
Yeah. Well, I'll probably do the same thing I did then when I picked the new business. But what I did is I saw an ad on Facebook. That's how it started. It said how to build an online fitness company. To that point, I was 23 or so. I was not a huge fan of social media, and I didn't even understand why people had it. I thought it was the dumbest shit ever. I was like, so you're telling me people get on here to post pictures so other people can like it? It just made no sense to me. As soon as I realized it could be used for business, I was like, that I can go with. So I clicked on the ad. It was a high ticket sell, high pressure, no idea what was happening. The guy's like, oh, it's the last spot, whatever. I give him all my money. I had $2,000, had to apply for a credit card, paid the rest a couple days later, got in the course. First like 7 videos were mindset. And I was like, what the fuck did I just buy? This is stupid, right? And then I remember just messaging the coach. I'm like, guy, look, like I don't need all this mindset shit. Just tell me what to do. And he's like, all right, message people, get them on a call, raise your price. And at the time I was charging $47. So I said, okay, I don't know why I paid so much money for this. I did it. I made $10,000 in the first week. And I was like, oh shit. And that was 3 times what I was making at the time. I was making maybe $3,000 a month. So I called my boss, quit my job, moved all my shit home to my parents, said, hey, let me live here. I'll pay you very little, like, $1,000 a month. And I'm going to go all in on my business. And then I just sat in that room for a year and I didn't leave. I would go probably months sometimes without seeing my dad. And I did $1 million.
And you lived in the same house as him?
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't leave.
That's crazy.
I didn't really leave. The only time I would leave the room was to eat, or if I would go to the gym. And sometimes I'd only go to the gym because I felt so shitty that I was like, I need to do something because I feel like unhealthy. So I go and do usually sometimes I'd even lift. I'd just do an hour of cardio because I don't want to spend more time to just try to burn as many calories as I could and get some mental clarity. And then after a year of that, I basically did it all myself, all the calls, all the messaging, all the ads, fulfillment, all of it. I started getting a lot of trainers asking me for help. And at first I said no because I had hired 5 business coaches. And in my head, I said, man, you guys suck ass. You guys are all teaching trash. And the only reason I succeeded is because I'm crazy. And that's really, I mean, they helped. Don't get me wrong. I think I was a little too far this way.
But if they were that good, there would be more Tanners, and there's not. There's not many people who have gotten to your level.
Yeah, so there's probably more truth in the middle. But eventually I had 10 or 15 people on a waiting list that were just begging me to do it. And so I'm 25 and I see 150 grand. I'm like, all right, fuck it, I'm doing it. So I started helping trainers, and I was running the 2 companies simultaneously. The trainer company went to 300 like in 30 days, and then it went to $1 million in 3 months, like over $1 million in revenue. I was like, holy shit. So at that point, I was trying to run 2 companies. You guys know that's a shit show. I had my employees and contractors working in both sides. So I shut down the fitness side. It was doing like 150 a month. This one was doing like 300 or 400 within 90 days, or actually 30 days, right? But then it started scaling. And so I started going all in on that. And then that did super well. We did 10 million the second year, which was insane. Like just went absolutely exponential. And then after that, EliteCEOs was kind of came about on my hat because people outside of fitness started asking for help. And in hindsight, that may have not been the best decision. I think I was just so focused on scale. So I just kept doing like whatever I felt the least resistance on. But that's how the company was built. And then it's been like a little, like 5 years. It'll be 6 years in September. And I stepped out on the 1st. So that's kind of the long story short.
I know at some point during that meteoric rise, you had a Lambo. I know you don't have it anymore. I want to hear a little bit about that story because, again, like, bro, like you being through these experiences, being 31, already being through so much of like where a lot of us are at, where we're on that rise, right? And we look at those flashy things like the Lambo, right? Like, tell us your experience with the Lambo. I know you had it. This shit was sexy. It was red, right?
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit. I want to know that story.
Yeah, so I tried to get a brand new SVJ when they came out, and they were all out of stock. They've only made like 800. So I bought it from the first baseman of the San Francisco Giants. I forget his name. And he had like 20 miles on the shit, or like 200. It was nothing. It was brand new. So I bought it for $550, and I customized the entire thing, wheels, interior, everything, made it just how I wanted. And it was a sick car, but I've never had a supercar before. So, you know, when I got it, oh, you have to have this attachment to, you know, play music. Okay, that's stupid. You have to charge it up to a battery tender. The battery's going to die. And then you have to replace it or get a new one, depending on how long it sits there. The way the car was too, I had custom rims. And so the rims stuck out a little bit and they would scrape. And the valet did it multiple times. So it was a great car. It was fun, but I didn't drive it that much. And then after 6 months, like anything, gets old. And so I had this massive vehicle that I didn't drive that much. It was kind of a pain. And then that's when I was going to move to Puerto Rico. And so here's the irony of the whole thing. So I moved to Puerto Rico to save money on taxes. And I come back a year later because I just realized that was so stupid. And the car went from 550 to, I think now it's valued at about 1.2 million. So if I just stayed in Miami and not gone to Puerto Rico and just lived my life, I would have made $700,000 on my net worth. So overall, I would say this: if you're into cars or you really like watches, whatever, you can get them. But my personal experience is after 6 months, it gets old and then you need the next one. And so for me, I'm going, okay, eventually this car will be old. And if I'm just going to continue to replace it, unless it's just purely passive income. So purely passive income that you want to just blow on, it doesn't make sense to me because I'd rather just take the money and put it in investments that'll make me more cash or businesses that I care about. And the reality is that what I found is girls, you know, you get it for girls. Girls don't really care. They just want to know you're rich. They do care if you're rich, I will say that, but they don't really care if you have a Lamborghini, right? It's rare. So I think for me, it was a good experience. I'm glad I did it. That's kind of how I've learned a lot through life. But after 6 months, any car, home, house, watch you get, in my opinion, gets old. And so I don't see the point of doing all this work just to buy something to impress other people if you don't really care. If it's for you, awesome. And it was for me. But after 6 months, I said, okay, like I had my fill. I did my thing. I drove it around. It's great. Who gives a shit?
You said something I love that Hormozi taught you, because I know he's one of your mentors. And he said, because you were talking to him about Puerto Rico. And
yeah,
you were like,
he called me about it and talked to me for like an hour, like randomly one day. Yeah.
Yeah. And first of all, that's amazing that you have a relationship with him like that. But I remember you were telling me, it was like, dude, I moved to Puerto Rico. I'm fucking miserable. Like I have to fly like hours all the time just to get to Miami to go see like my girlfriend or my friends or whatever.
Yeah.
And Hormozi's telling me, dude, you make all this money to be free. Why are you selling your freedom for money? And that really, like, I remember my brain having a switch and aha in that moment, right? Being like, that's so true. We make all this money to be free, to do what we want. But it's like at a certain point, something, there's like a farce in our brain, some stupid brain fart happens where you're like, oh, wait, no. I got to live like this now to keep the money. It's like, no, why?
It's like a contractionary mindset too. I remember, bro, Tanner saved us years of our life because I remember when we met him at the Alex Becker Mastermind, we were talking about Puerto Rico, right? And he was like kind of going through the experience and we were going to go visit him. And I was just watching. I was like, okay, like, let's see how this shakes out. So what's the one-liner, Tanner? Like, why should entrepreneurs who are trying to save all that money on tax just say, fuck Puerto Rico, it's not worth it? And is it worth it for some people? Like, what's the trade-off?
The girls are not cute. That's all you need to know. I mean, the reality is just, if you could pick anywhere to live in the world, regardless of circumstance or taxes, where would you go? And if the answer is not Puerto Rico, then there's no point, because you're admitting that you'd rather be somewhere else, but you're only going there to save money. And I think Alex hit the nail on the head. Is it doesn't matter how much money you die with. It really doesn't. It's more, if you died as, like, for him, right, he's gonna hit $1 billion before he's 40. If he dies worth $5 billion versus $1 billion, does anyone give a shit? I wouldn't. I still think $1 billion is very impressive. And I just think going back to the point is, it's on an island. Everything is slow. Government's slow. It's still obviously mostly Spanish speaking. So if you speak Spanish, great. If you don't, it's not. Again, I'm not saying this is like to be rude, but it's not Miami women. These are Puerto Rican, right? And so just you put all those things.
They like the gringos.
They do, but like, yeah, my experience.
He doesn't like them.
Maybe I was just in the wrong part of the island. But the other thing too is all the rich, affluent people go to one spot. And so it's a resort. And so if you've ever been to a resort, you're at a resort for a week, you're ready to go home. You've seen it all. So it's very small. It's very close knit. And I think beyond that, it's the mindset, right? Is that everyone is there to save money versus if you're in New York, Miami, California, everyone's trying to make more. And I think that mindset matters. And the quality of the circles, I think, will be higher. So whether you're 30 years old, you got to think of it this way. That's for a man, I think 30 years old is your prime. If you've made money in your 20s, you have a good amount of money, you're still young, you're still fairly good looking. Your value goes up in women's eyes, right? So most 20-year-old women want to date a 30-year-old, not a 20-year-old, right? For those reasons. And then it's like, why do I want to live the best 10 years of my life in Puerto Rico? On the other side, if you're older, when it doesn't matter, why do I want to live my last years of my life in Puerto Rico? So I think it was a nice fantasy I told myself in my head, because I got a disgustingly large tax bill and it pissed me off. And that's what started the whole thing. But once I lived there for a year and I realized I was flying back and forth and I didn't really want to be there, it just didn't end up making sense. And so I think you do have to decide if you're going to choose freedom over money, because realistically, the reason Miami or New York or California, whatever, have the most people is that's where most people want to live. And so I think you just kind of bite the bullet and do what you got to do.
And you also just don't want to put money on that pedestal where it controls your life like that. Like, now you're living in a place that you're not happy, but you're doing it for the money. It's like, why are we making money? And so I hope, God willing, we save at least one person who watches that as a reel or as a YouTube content.
And the people who say they like Puerto Rico better, like, they're full of shit. I think they're lying. I think they've convinced themselves they like it better. I'm like, there's no way you're going to convince me that you prefer Puerto Rico over Miami. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
When I visited, I knew immediately. And then you said something earlier about how, like, everybody gets the Lambo because it impresses the girls, right? So, another huge piece of advice I think a lot of people in our generation need is how do you kind of give off that vibe to women that you are successful and wealthy? I mean, I'm sure it's just by the way you talk, but for everybody who's listening, right? Like, how do you kind of balance that where you don't need to get a Lambo, but you're still able to have that perception and lead to the, same outcome, at least with women, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's different ways, realistically, like, social media makes it very easy. People can go to my social media. They can tell in 5 seconds what I do. Part of your brand as a business guy is, hey, I've done this, I've done that. Right. So they can read that right off the bat. The other thing is just a lot of times if I go to nice places, most of the people who have money are older. So if you're the only young guy there, or you have a table or something like that. But I mean, realistically, women just want to know you can provide for them. So I think, you know, you go on a date with a girl, you take her somewhere nice, they see your social media. I don't think it's that hard.
Yeah, they're not counting the number. They're just making sure, like you said, it's an honest signal. That's what the Lambo is. It's known as an honest signal. It's a signal that says, hey, I'm in this car. Clearly money isn't a problem. Or, you know, I'm wearing these clothes. Clearly money isn't a problem. I'm wearing this watch. Clearly money isn't a problem. They don't give a fuck about the numerical number. It's just, can you or can't you?
Yeah. And women just, I mean, you know, women, it's not even about being a gold digger. Some are, but women are very security driven. So they want to know, hey, he can take care of me. And hey, he's going to be around a long time. And that's really all most women I've found care about. And if you can give them those two things or show them that, you're good to go. I'm not going to say girls don't like cars, but I mean, it's like the gym. I get more compliments from men than women. It's the same thing for cars.
Yeah, that's why women like the big cars. They need the big cars. So if you get them an Uber, don't send them an X. Send them the
Send them the Uber Black. One thing just on the concept of money and being able to, you know, facilitate a certain level of life. I think also just to bring it back to the early days, because I think it's really important to stay true a little bit to the lessons and the beliefs that took us from 0 to 1. I tell people this all the time. What is harder to do in life? To go from 0 to 1 or 1 to a trillion? Right? Now, some people might go, oh, it's 1 to a trillion. I always say, look at the percent gain. 1 to a trillion is a trillion% gain. 0 to 1 is an infinity% gain. What's bigger, infinity or a trillion? Infinity. So I always tell people this, I say it's legitimately harder to leave a job or build something new or take the leap of faith and build a skill and run a business or whatever than grow your business to X arbitrary number. You can do that. Honestly, there's enough people out there. There's enough teachers out there. If you have the drive, you're someone like you, Tanner, that has this like fucking insane drive to do whatever the hell he wants in life, you're going to get it. You know, the real hard part is making that jump. And you think about the few things back when you had nothing. It's like, oh, I just want a little bit of money. You know, and none of us were like, oh, let's make $100 million, $1 billion. Maybe some of us were, but for the most part, it's like, dude, I just want to make, you know, I just want to be able to like have a decent car and, you know, pay my rent, right? And not be poor. And so when you have nothing, it's like, you know, you want to spend money. You want to use that money to facilitate a better life. And you realize money is just a tool. And that's, I think a lot of people need to realize that. One thing, Tanner, I can see in you, especially in your evolution, is you've really realized that. It's like money's cool, but like it's not the end all be all. It's a tool. It's, you know, when I read your posts online, you're like, dude, I want to build a business because it's fun. I want to build a business because I'm good at it. I want to build a business because I like to perform and work hard and pour myself into a purpose rather than make an X arbitrary 100 million. And I can clearly tell for you, it's like you're less bothered about if you make, like you just said, 100 million or 100 billion. It's more like you want to build something significant and that you're proud of, and, you know, you enjoy life on the way up.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I realized that when I was going through, it's probably a culmination of things. I was going through a breakup with my girlfriend at the time. That was tough. I was living in probably arguably the best place you could live in Miami, which was 1000 Museum. You know, those places are starting at like $40,000 a month now just to rent. And I had the Lamborghini, and I just remember feeling, man, I thought I'd feel a lot better. And that was actually it's actually a pretty hard time in my life because, you know, you start realizing how small you are. And you start realizing even the biggest people in the world, you could go somewhere and say, hey, who's Oprah Winfrey? Who's Mark Zuckerberg? Someone will be like, oh, I don't know who that is. It's crazy to me. So you start kind of realizing all these things that you place on a pedestal or that you thought people would care, they don't. So you have to start looking inside on, what am I really doing here? Like, what do I want to do? And if the money is the driving factor, unfortunately, once you have it, it can't drive you anymore. So for me, I just think, until I find something that I enjoy more than business, makes sense for me to keep pouring my time into that. Because you have to do something with your life. You can't sit around and do nothing. And so I think sometimes that has helped me to go, well, why do I do this? I just say, well, because I have to do something, right? I can't just talk to my family all day because my family is most important. Like eventually I have to go do something. So I just think whatever that thing is the best thing for people to do.
Absolutely. And when Zan was talking about the honest signals, by the way, guys, that's called Zahavian signals. And another thing I just wanted to ask you on a personal level, Tanner, is like, you know, I've seen and I followed your journey, right? Like I read your Facebook posts when they come up on my feed, always super high value, just because like you honestly share. I think not only through your ups, like everybody in the world, they want to show the ups, but they never show the downs. I think one thing that you've been really transparent about is those downs, right? And it's like, how do you get through, you know, even through those times? Like you're literally saying you had the money, you had, you know, probably able to get whatever girl you wanted. You had the penthouse, you had everything, right? But you're still going through like a depression state or a low, and that can happen. And it's like, when you start making a lot of money and you work years and years to get to a certain point and then you still feel depressed, you're kind of like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like, what, like, am I broken? Right. And I feel like a lot of us go through that at one point through our journey. And so it's like, how do you get through those lows? Like, what do you do? Like, I know that you're traveling right now. Has that been helping? You know, is that something do you think would help? You know, like what are the lessons you would say?
Well, when I was going through it, I started questioning a lot of things and trying to find out the answers to, you know, very deep questions. What's the meaning of life? Why am I here? What's the point? Those types of questions. I didn't have a lot of success finding the answers, meaning, you know, I went to a therapist and I tried reading and all these things, but ultimately there's a lot of questions that there's no way some human being is going to present something to the point where everyone's like, okay, 2 + 2 is 4. There's no way to really do that when it comes to the meaning of life or what's true, which religion's right, like all those types of things. And it really put me at a low point because I wanted to figure those things out, but I didn't feel like I could. So I think Hormozi's advice helped me the most, Alex Hormozi, and he has more of a nihilistic approach where it's like, well, nothing really matters. And I think we think a lot alike logically. We relate on a lot of levels. He was an engineer. I think it's part of why we get along. But that helped me more because the mind says instead of trying to figure it all out, just let it be. And that was more helpful for me because I felt when I went to therapy or I was asking questions, it just got me more and more confused. And I find, unfortunately, that happens in most of the most important things in life. So relationships, everyone's got an opinion. Religion, everyone's got an opinion. Politics, everyone's got an opinion. It's tough. So I think ultimately you have to just do what you feel is the right way. And I think the things that have been the most helpful for me outside of therapy, like therapy hasn't been that helpful for me, is when I'm starting to do retreats that kind of do a mix of, it's like meditation, therapy, and science, or like ritual. So for example, I did 40 years of Zen. You can look that up. I'm going to do ayahuasca in a couple weeks. I'm going to do ibogaine. You know, some people say may not do it, but I'm at the point in my life where I feel I'm looking for, you know, deeper personal development and answers. And I think a lot of those answers have to come from yourself. And I think that's what a lot of those practices are trying to do. So I definitely don't have the answer. I don't think anyone does, but I think you have to be okay with that, because if you're not, you'll drive yourself crazy.
You're going to go on these retreats and come back Steve Jobs. I know we were talking about the software. Maybe the tech will hit you while you're out there. What are your thoughts on drinking, bro? Do you drink as an entrepreneur? Like, I feel like for me, like one of the biggest things that I got back in my life going from like, I went to college, to UMass Amherst. After college, you know, spending my weekends kind of wasting them away in that environment. And then afterwards, I stopped wasting my weekends. Like that was one of the biggest, I think, cheat codes of my life, is getting 2 extra days, right? But where do you land on drinking? Do you have any advice there?
I just do occasional. So parties or special occasions. When I've been traveling, ironically, every single time I go to sit down, they want to give me alcohol, like every single time.
That's the upsell.
Yeah, but it's everything's in moderation. If I have one drink, I don't usually feel it, maybe even 2 drinks. It just goes down how much are you trying to drink and how much sugar is in the drinks as well. That makes a big difference. But I think occasional is fine. I think if it's a staple of your life and you're having a whiskey every single day after you work, I mean, alcohol is terrible for you. I would even argue that some illegal drugs are better for you than alcohol. Mm-hmm. And so if you're drinking all the time, I just think ultimately it will make you live. You won't live as long. You'll feel less energized. You'll wake up, you don't feel as good. So, you know, if you want to have a drink, by all means, I just don't think it should be a staple of your life.
Yeah. Absolutely. So as we begin to come to a close, Tanner, there's one thing I think in the last year that you've done, maybe 2 years, that I think is one of your most impressive body of works, and you've also given it away for free, which is something that I genuinely appreciate. I know a lot of people that I've spoken to have appreciated, and you won't believe, Tanner, maybe off record I'll talk to you about it, but you won't believe the kind of people that have stumbled upon your doc that you've sent. I mean, I'm in rooms with people with ridiculous sums of money, and they're reading your doc and they're talking to me about it. And I'll go, yo, I know Tanner, he's a G. So firstly, I just want to say, really appreciate that. What you did for the entire entrepreneur community is a big deal. And I really hope, once you're done with your traveling and soul searching and continuing to, dive deeper into who you are, you come back and do a little bit more of that. Cause I really do appreciate what you've done. And it's really, really impressive. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we'll link it in this interview. Tanner has actually interviewed a ton of ultra high net worth individuals with above $100 million net worth who have built companies, sold companies, invested, all kind of things. And he's actually distilled all that information into a document. Unbelievably valuable. We'll have it linked below. So I have this one question. Hopefully it's not too hard to answer. What is your central lesson from interviewing all these ultra high net worth individuals? If you could only give somebody one piece of advice and they wanted to make $100 million or more, what would you say that advice is from all those people, the most important piece of advice?
Yeah, so I'll do two just because it'll make it easier. There's two main themes. So the first theme is that most of the people who built the biggest companies, so billion or more, the fastest, had some type of internet marketing background. So they ran a digital agency, they did SEO, they beat guys like us, honestly. So that's where they started. Then the second thing is they picked something that had the easiest fulfillment with obviously the right amount of TAM, so total addressable market. So the two biggest examples that stick out was Justin Hartfield, who built Weed Maps, which is a Yelp for weed. So it fulfills itself. He doesn't have to do shit, and no one was doing it. And then it just grew by word of mouth. And so, but the biggest thing is the lack of fulfillment. You want to pick something that you literally have to do nothing, which is completely opposite than the businesses I built so far, which is high touch service, right? And then the second thing, well, those were the two things. Yeah, that's it. So the second example was Scott Cohen, who sold Byte for $1 billion, which is a competitor to Invisalign. Yep. And he said, yeah, I saw there was a huge market. They weren't doing a ton of shit well. I went in and did it better. And that was it. And I beat him. And he said they were, I don't know how he got these numbers, but he said they were, cost per acquisition was, let's say 1,000 or 1,500. He got his down to 400. He had a better sales team, better customer service. You should go read some of their reviews. Their reviews are ridiculous. But again, pretty easy fulfillment. They put them on, they're done. I don't know if there's recurring in that model, but I think that's the biggest thing. And so that's why it's so hard, I think, when you're thinking about the next company you build, or that's why people do tech, because tech is easy fulfillment, right? It's why it gives crazy. So it doesn't matter if it's in tech or not. But the thing I saw is you don't want something that has tons of fulfillment, because that's what makes it hard to scale. When all you have to do is push it with word of mouth or marketing, it's easy. You saw that with Hyros.
That sounds
like something that isn't easy to do, but we'll get there. Like what Alex Hormozi and Layla are doing, it'll get there, but it's definitely harder and it's slower because they have to build these teams, they have to hire, they have to train, they have to wait 3 months to see if they implemented the changes. They'll get there, but it's slow. But if you're trying to do something really fast and you're trying to have a massive multiple and you want to hit $1 billion, that's the two things I saw is they have great marketing skills. So when they find the right product, they can push it. And then the product they have is little to no fulfillment. And if you can focus on those two things, that's the key.
Bro, I think that's the greatest business sauce we've had to date on this podcast. I have fucking goosebumps right now. So thank you for that, because now when we make $1 billion company, I'm buying you whatever the fuck you want and a steak dinner on me.
We got to go on a trip, man. Zan, is it cool if we talk about like where are you right now, Tanner? Like what part of the world and what are you doing?
So I'm in Costa Rica. So I don't know if you guys can see on camera, but if you guys look at my neck from here up, I did basically as a facial with stem cells. I didn't know I was having surgery, but I got in there like, hey, we're putting you under. And I said, okay. But I did 3 things. So they did a facial where they basically microneedle your whole face and they put the stem cells in, umbilical cord stem cells. So those are the best kind. They did another one where they did an IV and they did 100 million umbilical cord stem cells. And I just did that hoping it'll help me, make me younger, attack inflammation, whatever. And then the third one they did, which is the one I think works the least effective, is they took some of my own stem cells that I can re-inject once a year. And I'm not as big on that, but I said, what the fuck, what the F? Like, I'm just here. I'm going to go ahead and do it. And then I've been traveling the world since I stepped out of my company. So so far I've been to Brazil, Argentina, Chile. We've been here. I'm going to head to Mexico next. And then I'm going to start headed east to like Africa and Europe, Asia. But that's why I'm here. Yeah.
So this is the Futurist, right? Is that a new type of treatment? Has it been around a while? Like, is there a lot of data behind it? The procedure that you just did? I honestly thought I saw some red. I thought you were just doing some like some tanning, something new.
So these are all from the needles. So these are all the micro needles. So it'll go down in a couple of days, but I had this surgery like 2 days ago. It's pretty minimal. I've had tons of surgery. So I woke up, I was super effed up for about 2 hours and then I was fine. But yeah, it's stem cells are pretty progressive right now. Most of the types of stem cells I'm getting are not legal in the US. That's why I'm in Costa Rica. So they are legal here. And they're a little bit controversial, but I think it's very progressive medicine. So most people who can do this type of treatment are rich, right? And that's usually how it goes until it's more mainstream. It's, affluent people can access it. So I'm not 100% sold on all of it. But for example, getting stem cells as an injection to a certain area where you've torn muscle, they've had people who've repaired it, right? And so I'm at the point in my life where I have good cash. I don't really buy stupid shit. And so this is my dumb car, Rolex watch, whatever have you. And I just geek out a little bit on it. I'm not as crazy as Brian Johnson. He's the guy who sold Venmo and is spending like $3 million a year to be 18. I'm not like
a vampire, honestly.
Yeah, I'm not that level. But for me, I said, hey, what the heck? I've always wanted to do it. I like paying for experiences. And if it doesn't work, I won't ever do it again. But I'll show you guys the before and afters when my face calms down and see if it helps. But it's supposed to help. Specifically, the face is the one thing you can see. Obviously, the stem cells I injected in my body, there's no way to really know. But I'm just going to see how I feel and go from there. But the face, I'm hoping, just makes me look a lot better. I'm trying to go from a 5 to a 7.
Yeah, man. If me and you were side by side picking up some chicks already, I know that.
Brother said
it would be a little.
G, if you're a 7, we're all 3s. Fuck
yeah,
me.
it'd be a tough decision. But after the stem cells, man, I'm fucked.
They South America, they do like gringos. I will say that they're all about the white guys. So
it's okay.
Yeah, we got to go to Dubai.
We'll try our luck in the Middle East. We'll go to Dubai. We'll try our luck there.
We'll see who wins in Dubai.
So I think that's fascinating. By the way, stem cells, I've been obsessed with stem cells. Just even as a kid, I remember learning about it and I was like, oh shit, like I'm going to be Wolverine. So I'm a big believer in it for sure. I think that it's certainly, especially when you look at the science, it's like almost like a no-brainer, right? These are fresh cells that they're undifferentiated. They don't have the telomeric loss, which is why we age. The telomeres on your cells on your DNA chain gets shorter and shorter, and you age and your cells die quicker. But you've been traveling the world, I'm assuming alone, right? Unless you're not. And what are some lessons that you've gotten from traveling the world? Like, do you think it's been useful? Do you think it's like, I'm kind of just whatever? Or do you think you're getting like a little bit of inspiration and learning more about yourself? I know some people, they have mixed, views on traveling the world.
Yeah. Well, so I'm traveling with, he's kind of my head of marketing. He does all my video stuff. So he's over here in the corner. You guys can't see him. Benassi. He's a good friend too. Like, luckily we connect. I think if you don't connect with your video guy, it's kind of trash because he's with you all the time. So depending on how long, sometimes we'll share a room if it's a couple days in the area. Like this week, we're separate because it's 7 days. And so obviously you need a little bit of privacy. But the reason I'm traveling, honestly, I'll start there, is that's the advice I got. Everyone who told me, tried to get advice on the next company, said, before you do anything, travel. It'll open your mind. You'll see different things. It'll give you a chance to relax. They said, you really need to fill your cup back up. And so I think the biggest benefit so far has been just the different things you can do that maybe are not legal in the US. So for example, ayahuasca. Like I've never done that, and I want to try it because I want to work on my personal development and things that I don't know bother me or have bothered me. That in reality, bad things will always happen, but it's how we perceive them, and it's emotional maturity. And I think that's something that I want to work on more because some things do bother me a lot, and I don't want them to. I'm going to do an ibogaine treatment, which is usually for drug users, but it has some people with PTSD, anxiety, depression. They can use that as well. That one actually I heard is more gnarly because you can stay up for as long as 48 hours. They have a whole medical team there. It's a whole thing. So I'm just pushing myself a little bit more personally before I get back in the business. I know how to grow companies and I'm good at it. I know how to get shit done, but I think, pushing so hard for so long, I've never maybe done as much of the personal development as I've needed to. So yeah, it's been good. I'm still excited. It's just started. I'm only a couple months in. I've only been in South America. I'm really more excited to go to Africa, Europe, and Asia and kind of see what happens from there. But
where can people follow this entire journey? Like what's the best social and what's
I do a lot of my stories. So if you watch my stories daily, we put a lot there. I think we are going to do one YouTube video that kind of recaps where we've been so far. We'll probably do 4 this year. So like 1 every quarter or something. But yeah, if you watch my stories, you'll see where I'm at. You'll see what I'm doing, especially at the retreats. I think most people find those interesting. I was never a big fan of them because again, I've always been like, oh, fucking therapy sucks. Like, I'm just this fucking macho tough guy. But it's, I think I've gotten to a point in my life where I'm more open-minded and I'm trying different things. And I'm a big fan of Aubrey Marcus. He built a $400 million company and he has some viewpoints that I'm going through right now. So I'm just like, fuck it. Like I got a lot of money. It costs a lot of money, but I don't care. And it's relative, right? It's relative to what I make.
And why do we make money? Again, why do we make money? A lot of people forget, right? To live.
And just to have a better life. So for me, I'll spend a lot of money this year on my personal development and, trying different retreats and so forth. But what I've learned is a lot of life is how you perceive it. And so you either can perceive it through ignorance, which, some people do. Like that's why you go to a poor country and they have a great life because they have no cell phone and they don't see cars and hot chicks and all these things they have. Or 2 is what's out there, but you perceive it differently. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do right now and it's easier said than done, right? Like I'm a very kind of rock hard guy where I say, stop being such a, and just can do it. But I think, once you've shown that you can do those things and you can get to a certain level, if things continue to bother you, I think it's like, okay, what things do I need to work on with myself? And I think it's perception and emotional maturity because the same bad things are going to continue to happen. So if you perceive it differently, it should affect you differently.
Yeah. I mean, the experience is going to give you a crazy ROI. I know you're going to come up with that idea because your cup is going to be full. And this is the Futurist, right? So I gotta know your take, man. $60 million in the high ticket industry, right? Like what's the future of high ticket? Like, is it still a good time for newbies to get in? Like, where do you think it's going? Is it going to evolve? Like, where are we at?
Yeah, it's getting harder. I think, done for you aspects are starting to come into play because it goes through cycles. So I came into the industry and was pushing everyone through Messenger. Usually you have a 2-year window. After 2 years, everyone started catching on and copying. And I'm not here to say I pioneered it, but I definitely was one of the first guys who scaled with it.
No, you blew it up. You were part of that.
Yeah. So then you kind of see that. And then what I'm noticing now is I'm 5 years deep is, everyone's come in and kind of ran their little mastermind and made some money. So people are more skeptical. They're less trusting. They've had a bad experience with the coach. And so what's starting to push people over the edge, what I've seen from my portfolios and so forth, is done for you stuff. So whether it's sales team, ads, done for you tech, whatever. So I think where it's at now is there's a lot less trust. Cost of acquisition is going up and you do have to have some done for you aspects. And the good people are staying and all the shitty people are leaving. Like most of the people have left. My personal opinion is either they didn't have a team big enough, so they were still very much in the grind, or their margins were going down and they're like, hey, there's easier things I can do. So I don't know if you guys have noticed, but the done for you now is picking up a lot. So specifically
it makes sense, bro, because if you can't trust anybody, the done for you shows if they're competent.
Right. And then the done, like you're seeing right now, a lot of the done for you setters and salespeople, And that's on the 2-year cycle. So in about 2 years, people are going to go through that, be like, yeah, these people promised me awesome setters, but they're actually from, Antarctica, and they're $2 an hour, and they suck, and they work like they're $2 an hour. Like, I'm seeing it happen all over again. So I think the industry just goes in cycles. And I think to get good, at least what I've seen, is you just have to constantly innovate. So if I only still offered the same service I offered 5 years ago, we'd probably be out of business. But because we've continued to build upon it and add in different aspects and different revenue streams, we're fine.
Yep.
But just most people, they don't do that. They kind of get to a certain point. They're like, I'm making good money. They stop innovating. They stop pushing. They stop hiring people. And then eventually the market catches up and you see them dip out. And they're like, oh, yeah, like I want to do different stuff. And it's like, no, you don't. Like, you're not making any money.
But even with your hiring, bro, like the process that Zan was explaining earlier, it's like you don't hear a lot of people in our industry doing that. And that's why it works. It's because you did what everybody else wasn't. And so
zig when others zag.
Yeah,
and it's also just being willing to make less. The thing people say stupid stuff like, well, I need to shut this down to put all my focus somewhere else. Well, if you completely remove yourself from the business and you're just an advisor, so like I only have a 15-minute call per day, that's plenty to keep my pulse on things. And then, yeah, let's say I only make 30% margin, but I'm doing 0% work. So who cares? People get way too tied to margin, I found. And so I have buddies who are making 80%. They're working 18 hours a day. And I'm like, it doesn't matter, dude. Like, because that business, different. Yeah, that business is not going to get, unless they enjoy it. But if their goal is to hit $1 billion or 9 figures, they're bottlenecking themselves because they're so crazy about having a high margin that it's like, okay, you're never going to be able to move yourself out of the business.
Yep. And we saw that big time. I mean, we went from 7 figures a year to 8 figures a year. And now we're aiming to reach a 9-figure run rate. We want to reach 8 million a month by the end of the year. And we totally noticed that, right? Like the only way to really grow, unless you're bringing in some crazy innovative technology, I think AI is one of those things. Once, like we were talking a little before the pod, once AI catches up and it needs to be where it needs to be, I think margin will open up significantly again. But, we definitely saw that. We went from like 70, 80% margins to now like 20, 30% at 8 figures, right? But it also runs a lot better. The machine runs a lot better. The results are a lot better. The process is a lot better. The results are, and the repeatability in the machinery is a lot better. And also, Hassan and I have the luxury to go out and work on other things. Like we just launched an NFT.
Happier because
we launched an NFT project over the last year and a half, and that's valued at a $30 million valuation. So we never would have been able to even do that, work on something cool like that, without having the time freedom. So now that you're at a position, Tanner, you've got the time freedom, you've got this honestly, genuinely wisdom. I can see it from last time we spoke to now. I can see that you've become, I don't want to say humble. Obviously you have that humility, right? That, okay, you understand, look, there's always going to be a bigger fish, whatever. But I can also just see like almost like a aspect and energy of Zen in you where like, it's almost like, okay, like I understand I'm a human being. I have, these strengths, I have these weaknesses. It's almost like you have a better view on yourself, which is really cool. So if you could begin to kind of postulate, I know, again, this is why you're traveling, you're trying to find out, but if I could kind of try and stretch you a little bit and say, if you were to say, look, in the next year, you're going to have this new business, right? What niches are you kind of looking more towards? What, I know obviously you said good total addressable market, really easy to fulfill on, but there's a lot of different realms you could get into. What do you think is kind of drawing you in, or do you really have no idea?
And then we're gonna compare this answer to post ayahuasca, and we're gonna see the impact.
Yeah, I'm not really going to those for like business ideas, but I'm hoping they'll help. I'm just open-minded. I think so far, again, like I have no clue, but so far, obviously, something in tech, it makes sense because it hits all the marks: high multiple, easy to fulfill, etc. Recurring revenue. The other thing I've thought about is possibly running a fund. So like commercial real estate, private equity fund, for example. The only thing I don't like about that is it's easy fulfillment, so to speak, but then you're kind of a slave to those people. So that kind of hits the X on what I'm wanting. I don't really want to do that. I know some of my friends have been offered, hey, we'll give you $200 million, and they're like, yeah, no, I'm good, thanks. Because then you kind of are at the beck and call of those people. Those are the two things I've looked at so far. I think I'll have more answers for you guys in the next 3 months because I'm going to start interviewing private equity individuals because that's where I'm going to get the real data. Because if they are running a equity firm and they've got 25 companies, it's easy for them to go, okay, out of all these companies, these are the ones that definitely crush it. And if I ask 4 or 5 guys, it's going to be easy to see the pattern. So I am looking for something that has 10, 15, 20, 25x multiple. So it definitely won't be in the service industry, but there's high probability of tech, but I don't know what else. It just depends. But I'm looking for something that has a high multiple, and then, be able to interview those CEOs that have exited, that don't care anymore. And they'll just tell me whatever I want to hear, like, hey, what would you have done different? What did you do right? What did you do wrong? And then I'll be ready to go to work. So.
Zan, you're muted. That's baller as fuck, though. That's exactly like Bezos even attributed to the fact that he was working at a company. I'm pretty sure it was a
hedge fund.
Yeah,
and he was a hedge fund. He was looking through all these business models.
Yeah. So that's a really good point, man. I gotta see what you come up with there.
No, it's super smart. Honestly, Tanner, you doing what you did with that. I'm straight up telling you. I'll drop it a little bit because I can't share too much. But I'm literally in rooms worth billions of dollars sometimes, and they're bringing up your doc. Like, they'll send it to me, and I'll be like, bro, like, that's crazy. So I'm just letting you know the impact of what you did. Maybe you thought, oh, whatever, I'm just doing it for fun and I'm gonna give it away. But bro, I'll say that's probably one of the most impactful things you've done, because it's so huge. Nobody gets a chance to do what you've done and has the time or even the respect. A lot of these guys would never speak to somebody who hasn't done something, but they look you up and they're like, all right, this guy's a G. Let me hop on. It would be fun for me.
Bro, even the personal stuff, dude. No one shares that shit. And it's like, you're saving us years. So we do owe you either way. Like, you're a G for that, bro. I appreciate it.
I remember even there's some people who have brought up the fact that, they've literally mentioned your name and they were like, hey, I went through a really tough time. I made all this money and I hate my life. And I don't know if you know this guy, Tanner, but like, I saw his video on what he went through. Yeah. And it's like, oh shit. Like, if he can, walk himself back off a ledge, I can too. And, so those are some things that are just incredibly impactful. And I want you to know that you really helped a lot of people. You might not know, maybe you do, but there are a lot of people that have spoken your name with a lot of respect and just gratefulness for what you've done. So,
bro, I'm hyped to be in person, man. We gotta do this in person. We'd have a great time.
We'll have fun.
So anyways, everybody, thank you so much, Tanner. If there's anything else you want to share, please go ahead. But genuinely, really appreciative for this interview. And I think that, again, your transparency, your honesty, and you're willing to just say what's on your mind, really appreciate it. And I think a lot of people are going to enjoy this podcast. So thank you.
If you're trying to be a mega Chad by the age of 31, you got to watch this pod. You got to follow Tanner. He will give you the blueprint.